45 minutes. That was the specific amount of time required to turn optimistic anticipation into a heavy, suffocating kind of humiliation. Imani sat at the small, candlelit table for two, her back perfectly straight, her hands folded in her lap to hide the fact that her fingers were trembling. The restaurant was buzzing with the low, comfortable hum of Friday night dates, clinking silverware, soft laughter, the rustle of napkins being placed on laps. Every single sound felt like an insult. She had checked her phone exactly 12 times in the last 10 minutes. No new messages. The last text from Jason sat on the screen, mocking her with its casual cruelty. Running a bit late, be there soon. That was an hour ago. The soon had expired. The late had turned into absent. Imani stared at the empty chair opposite her. It wasn't just empty, it was loud. It screamed to the entire dining room that the beautiful woman in the emerald green dress was not worth showing up for. The waiter, a young man who looked pained on her behalf, approached the table for the fourth time. He didn't say anything, just filled her water glass with excruciating slowness, his eyes darting to the untouched menu at the empty place setting. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the extra menu. "Should I take this away, miss?" he asked, his voice dropped to a whisper, as if she were at a funeral. Imani felt the heat rise up her neck, burning against her dark skin. To say yes was to admit defeat. To say no was to prolong the delusion. "Give him 5 more minutes," she said, though her voice lacked any conviction. "He's probably just stuck in traffic," the waiter nodded, a polite lie in his eyes, and walked away. Imani looked down at her phone again. She opened her messages to Chloe. "Is he there yet? Is he cute? Send pics." The cheerful bubbles felt like they were from a different lifetime. Before she could stop herself, Imani typed back, "He's not coming." She didn't press send. She just stared at the blinking cursor, feeling the familiar ache in her chest. It was the ache of being the almost girl. Almost chosen. Almost loved. Almost enough. If you've ever sat in a crowded room feeling completely invisible, you know exactly how cold the air suddenly feels against your skin. Before we see who walks through that door and changes everything, take a second to subscribe and comment below. What's the longest you've ever waited for a date before walking out? Tell me your story. Because Imani was about to walk out, to save whatever shreds of dignity she had left. She grabbed her purse, the leather cool under her sweating palms. She was done. She was going to stand up, walk past the pitying waiter, get in her car, and cry until her eyes were swollen shut. She placed her hands on the table to push herself up. But just as her muscles tensed to move, the air in the restaurant shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure change. The chatter at the nearby tables died down, ripple by ripple, silence spreading from the entrance like a wave. Imani froze. She looked up. Standing at the maitre d' stand was a man who looked like he had just walked out of a high-stakes negotiation or a war zone and hadn't decided which one he preferred. He was Korean, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that cost more than Imani's car. It was black, sharp, and tailored to within an inch of its life. But it wasn't the clothes that made the room go quiet. It was the way he stood. Total stillness. He wasn't looking at the maitre d', who was frantically typing on a tablet. He was scanning the room with dark, calculating eyes. Behind him, 2 other men in similar suits stood like statues, their hands clasped in front of them, watching the perimeter. This wasn't a dinner guest. This was something else entirely. The man's gaze swept over the couples, the families, the business dinners, and then it landed on Imani. It didn't drift past her. It stopped. It locked on. For a heartbeat, the noise of the restaurant seemed to vanish completely. He looked at the empty chair across from her, then back at her face. His expression didn't change, no pity, no smile, but his eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were solving a math problem. He said something to the maitre d', a short, clipped command that Imani couldn't hear, and then he started walking. Straight toward her. The room watched him move. He walked with a fluid, predatory grace, eating up the distance between the door and her table. Panic spiked in Imani's chest. She looked around, wondering if there was someone behind her, but she was seated against the wall. He was coming for her. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Was she in trouble? Had she done something? As he got closer, she saw the details, the sharp line of his jaw, the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the expensive watch glinting under the dim lights. He stopped exactly 2 feet from her table. Up close, his energy was overwhelming, a mix of danger and absolute control. He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw that his eyes weren't cold. They were furious, but not at her.
"He is not coming," the man said.
His voice was deep, textured, and surprisingly soft for someone who looked so lethal. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Imani opened her mouth to defend the imaginary Jason, to say something about traffic or batteries dying, but the lie died in her throat. She looked up at this stranger, this dangerous, beautiful man, and simply exhaled. "No," she whispered. "He's not." The man nodded once, sharp and decisive. He gestured to the empty chair with a hand that looked capable of crushing stone but moved with elegant precision. "May I?" He didn't wait for the maitre d' to pull it out. He gripped the back of the chair himself. Imani blinked, her brain struggling to catch up with the reality of the moment. A man who looked like he ran a criminal empire was asking to sit at her table. I'm not waiting for anyone anymore," she stammered, her defensive walls trying to scramble back up. "I was just leaving." The man paused, his hand still on the chair. He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the green dress, the way her hair framed her face, the unshed tears shimmering in her eyes. "Leaving is cowardice," he said, his tone conversational but heavy. "You dressed for dinner. You waited for dinner. You deserve dinner." He pulled the chair out.
"Seat."
"Please." It was the please that did it. It wasn't a command. It was an offer. A lifeline thrown into the drowning pool of her evening. Imani hesitated, her common sense screaming that this was insane, that she didn't know this man, that he had bodyguards standing by the door. But then she looked at the empty doorway where Jason should have been, and a spark of reckless anger ignited in her gut. She adjusted her posture. She lifted her chin. "Okay," she said. He sat down. The shift in the room was palpable. The waiter, who had been avoiding her table, rushed over immediately, looking terrified. "Sir? Miss? Can I get you?" The stranger raised one hand, and the waiter went silent instantly. "Bring the wine list."
"The reserve list."
"And take the lady's water away." "Bring sparkling." He looked at Imani. "Unless you prefer still?" Imani shook her head, mute. "Sparkling is fine." He turned his attention back to her, ignoring the terrified staff member. "I am Minho," he said.
"No Sernam."
"Just Minho." "Imani," she replied, her voice gaining a little more strength. "Imani," he repeated. He said her name slowly, testing the weight of it on his tongue.
"Faith."
"It suits you." Imani felt a flush that had nothing to do with embarrassment. "How do you know what it means?" He shrugged, a small, elegant motion. "I know many things. I know that whoever left you sitting here for 45 minutes is an idiot. And I know that the grilled sea bass here is excellent." Imani couldn't help it. A small, startled laugh escaped her lips. The sound seemed to break the tension that had encased her like glass. "You were watching the clock?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Minho leaned back, resting his elbows on the table, his fingers laced together. The scary edge of his presence softened, just a fraction, revealing something tired and human underneath. "I noticed time," he said. "People waste so much of it." The waiter returned with the water and the wine list, his hands trembling slightly as he poured. Minho didn't even look at the list. "The 05 Cabernet," he ordered. "And we will order now." He looked at Imani, his gaze intense. "Trust me with the food?" It was a small question, but it felt loaded. "Trust me." Imani looked at his hands, strong and still on the white tablecloth. She thought about Jason, who couldn't even decide on a text message. She looked at Minho, who made decisions as if they were laws of physics. "Okay," she said again. "I trust you." The appetizers arrived in a blur of efficiency that Imani had never experienced before. Minho ate with the same precision he walked with, but he made sure her glass was never empty. For the first 10 minutes, They spoke about the food, the texture of the tuna tartare, the richness of the sauce. It was safe ground. But Minho didn't seem interested in staying on safe ground. He poured a second glass of wine and looked her dead in the eye. "Why are you single, Imani?" The question was blunt, stripping away the polite layers of a first date. Imani choked slightly on her water. "That's a bold question for a stranger," she deflected. Minho didn't smile. "We are not strangers. We are two people eating dinner who would otherwise be eating alone. Answer the question." His directness was disarming. It didn't feel rude. It felt efficient, like he didn't want to waste time on pretenses. Imani set her fork down. She could lie. She could say she was focused on her career, or that she was picky. But something about the way he watched her, with that unwavering, dark intensity, made her want to tell the truth. "Because I'm invisible," she said. The words tumbled out before she could check them. "I'm the girl men date until they find the one they actually want to marry. I'm the placeholder. Good job, nice apartment, low maintenance. I'm easy to be with, but easy to leave." She looked down at her plate, ashamed of the confession.
"And today?"
"Today I just wanted to be seen. That's all." Silence stretched between them. She waited for the awkward platitude. "Oh, you'll find someone" speech. It didn't come. "I see you," Minho said. His voice was rougher now, lower. "I saw you from the moment I walked in. I saw the green dress. I saw the way you held your head, high even when you were hurting. I saw you." He reached across the table. He didn't take her hand, but he placed his fingertips on the tablecloth just inches from hers. "And I am not single because I am a placeholder," he continued, his eyes darkening with a shadow of something old and painful. "I am single because in my world, connection is a weakness. To love something is to place a target on it." Imani looked at him, really seeing the danger that clung to him now. "Your world?" she asked softly. "What do you do, Minho?" He held her gaze. "I protect things. I acquire things. And I eliminate problems." A chill ran down Imani's spine, but it wasn't fear. It was fascination. "And what am I?" she whispered. "A problem." Minho's face softened, the hard lines around his mouth relaxing into something that looked dangerously like affection.
"No," he said.
"You are an exception." The waiter arrived with the main course, breaking the spell, but the air between them remained charged, vibrating with unspoken electricity. They ate, and the conversation shifted. Minho told a story about his grandmother in Seoul, a woman who terrified him more than any rival gang leader. Imani told him about her job as a graphic designer, about the absurdity of corporate logos. They laughed. It was a genuine warm sound. For a moment, the bodyguards by the door and the missing date didn't exist. There was just this candlelight, wine, and a connection that felt terrifyingly real. By the time the dessert plates were cleared, the restaurant was nearly empty. The atmosphere had shifted from tense to intimate. Imani felt lightheaded, and not just from the wine. She felt reckless. She looked at Minho, who was watching her with that same calculating, intense expression he had worn when he first walked in. This was she started, searching for the word.
"Unexpected, Minho nojet."
He signaled for the check, but then stopped the waiter with a look. "No check," he said. The waiter nodded and scurried away. Of course. He probably owned the building. Or could buy it right now. Minho turned back to Imani. He leaned forward, closing the distance between them until she could smell his cologne, sandalwood, leather, and something metallic. He reached out and, this time, he covered her hand with his. His skin was warm, his grip firm and possessive. "Imani," he said, "I do not do things by half measures. I do not date. I do not wait. When I see what I want, I secure it." Imani's breath hitched. Her hand tingled under his. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Minho's thumb brushed over her knuckles, a slow, deliberate caress that sent shockwaves through her entire body. "I am saying that I am tired of empty chairs," he said. "And I think you are too." He paused, his eyes searching hers, looking for the fear, waiting to see if she would run. When she didn't pull her hand away, his gaze intensified. I have a proposition. A reckless one. But I think you are reckless too. Beneath that perfect dress, he squeezed her hand. Marry me. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Imani froze. What? She breathed. He didn't blink. Not today. Not tomorrow. But let us start with that as the goal. Skip the games. Skip the almost be mine. Fully. Let me show you what it is to be the only thing in the room that matters.
It was insanity.
It was the kind of thing you read about in books and laughed at because it wasn't real life. But looking at Minho, with his dark eyes and his scar and his terrifying sincerity, it felt more real than anything Jason or any other man had ever offered her. It was a cliff edge, and he was asking her to jump. You're crazy, she whispered, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Yes, Minho agreed. But I am also serious. He stood up, keeping her hand in his, pulling her gently to her feet.
Come.
Let me take you home. We will discuss the terms. He didn't let go of her hand as he led her toward the exit. The bodyguards fell into step behind them. Imani felt like she was floating, swept up in a current she couldn't control. They stepped out into the cool night air of the parking lot. The sudden drop in temperature made her shiver, and Minho immediately began to take off his suit jacket to place it around her shoulders. It was perfect. It was a movie moment. But just as the heavy silk lining touched her skin, a voice cut through the silence, like a jagged knife. Imani? They both froze. Imani turned, standing near the valet stand, looking disheveled and holding a pitiful bouquet of gas station flowers, was Jason. He looked from Imani to Minho, then down at their joined hands. I got stuck at work, Jason stammered, his eyes wide. I came as fast as I could. Babe, who is this? The magic bubble popped. The cold reality rushed back in. Minho stiffened beside her, his body transforming instantly from lover to weapon. He didn't look at Jason. He looked at Imani.
He didn't speak.
He just waited. The choice was physical, visceral, and immediate. The past, with its mediocre excuses and wilted flowers, or the terrifying, electric future standing beside her in a bespoke suit. Jason stood there, breath heaving slightly, the cheap plastic wrapper of the bouquet crinkling in his grip. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard in the quiet tension of the parking lot. He looked at Imani, his eyes pleading, sweating slightly under the amber streetlights. Imani, please, he said, taking a step forward, ignoring the wall of dangerous silence radiating from the man beside her. My battery died. The meeting ran over. You know how my boss is. I'm here now, aren't I? He gestured with the flowers, a pathetic offering of neon-dyed carnations that looked exhausted. I even stopped to get these. Doesn't that count for something? Imani looked at the flowers, then at Jason's face. For years, she had accepted this. She had accepted the at least he showed up logic. She had accepted the crumbs of effort and called it a meal. But standing next to Minho, with the weight of his silk jacket warm on her shoulders and the memory of his absolute, unwavering focus during dinner, the contrast wasn't just stark, it was embarrassing. She didn't feel angry anymore. She felt a sudden, crystal-clear exhaustion. She looked at Jason, really looked at him, and saw a boy who thought his time was the only currency that mattered. No, Imani said softly. The word hung in the cool air, heavier than a shout. Jason blinked, confused.
No?
What do you mean, no? I'm here. Imani took a deep breath, inhaling the sandalwood scent of the jacket she was wearing, grounding herself. It doesn't count, Jason. Effort isn't an afterthought you pick up at a gas station on the way to salvage a disaster. It's the 45 minutes I sat alone wondering what was wrong with me. It's the fact that you think being here is a prize I should be grateful for. She stepped closer to Minho, not out of fear, but out of instinct. She felt Minho's arms subtly shift, a protective cage forming around her space without him even touching her. You're late, she whispered, her voice trembling not with sadness, but with the finality of it. You're too late. And I'm not the girl who waits anymore, she turned her back on him. It was the hardest and easiest thing she had ever done. Minho, she said, looking up at the man who had terrified and thrilled her all night. Take me away from here. Minho didn't look at Jason. He didn't acknowledge the other man's existence. He simply nodded, opened the heavy back door of the black sedan that had glided silently up to the curb, and ushered her inside. The interior of the car was a sanctuary. It smelled of rich leather and silence. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, sealing out the parking lot, the wind, and the image of Jason standing there with his mouth open. Imani sank into the seat, the adrenaline crash hitting her all at once. Her hands started to shake. She clutched the lapels of Minho's jacket, staring straight ahead as the car began to move. Minho sat beside her, respecting the distance, not crowding her. He reached into a compartment and pulled out a bottle of water, unscrewing the cap before handing it to her. "Drink," he said gently. "Your adrenaline is dumping. You will feel cold soon." Imani took the water, her fingers brushing his. "Did I?" She swallowed hard. "Was I cruel?" Minho turned to face her, the passing streetlights casting rhythmic shadows across his sharp features. "Cruelty is making someone wait," he said, his voice low and rumbling against the quiet hum of the engine. "What you did was surgery. You cut out the rot. It hurts, but it saves the patient." He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "You saved yourself, Imani. I just held the door." They drove in silence for a while, the city blurring past the tinted windows. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was a heavy, charged atmosphere where unspoken questions floated like dust motes. Imani finally turned to him.
You were serious, she said.
Back in the restaurant.
About
the proposal. It felt ridiculous to say the word out loud. Marriage. To a stranger. Minho didn't flinch. He adjusted his cuff, his movements precise. "I am a businessman, Imani.
But I deal in high stakes.
When I see an asset, a person, who has value, who has fire, I do not hesitate." He turned his body fully toward her. "My life is complicated. It is loud. It is dangerous. I have many people who fear me, many who work for me, but I have no one who sees me." He reached out, tucking a stray curl of hair behind her ear, his hand lingering on her cheek. His skin was rough, calloused, a stark contrast to the gentleness of his touch. "Tonight you saw me. You didn't look at the bodyguards. You didn't look at the watch. You looked at my eyes. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Imani leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut for a second. "This is insane," she whispered. "You're a criminal, Minho. You just admitted it." "I am a protector," he corrected softly. "There is a difference." The car slowed, turning onto a private drive that wound up a steep hill. "And you are not scared of me. You are scared of the feeling of being safe. It is foreign to you." Imani opened her eyes. He was right. That was exactly what it was. The terror wasn't that he would hurt her. The terror was that he wouldn't. That he would actually catch her. "Where are we going?" she asked as the car approached a massive, modern structure of glass and steel overlooking the entire city skyline. "My home," Minho said. "Because I am not taking you back to an apartment where you will sit alone and overthink the past hour. Tonight, you are my guest.
No expectations.
No marriage tonight. Just safety. And a view that you deserve." The car stopped. The door was opened by a driver before Imani could even reach for the handle. Minho stepped out and offered his hand. Walking into his home was like walking into a different dimension. The ceilings were 20 feet high, the walls were pure glass, and the city lights of Los Angeles lay spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds. It was breathtaking, cold, and beautiful. But Minho immediately began to dismantle the coldness. He walked to a fireplace that dominated the center of the room and pressed a button. Flames roared to life instantly. He gestured to a massive cream-colored sofa.
"Seat.
Take off your shoes. I will make tea." Imani blinked. You make tea?" Minho looked over his shoulder, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. "I am Korean, Imani. We take tea very seriously. And you look like you need ginger and honey." He disappeared into a kitchen that looked like a laboratory. Imani stood there for a moment, looking at the city below, feeling the warmth of the fire on her legs. She kicked off her heels. She sank into the sofa. For the first time in years, The knot of anxiety in her chest began to loosen. She wasn't waiting for a text. She wasn't wondering if she was enough. She was just here. Minho returned with 2 ceramic cups, steam rising from them in delicate spirals. He sat down, not on the opposite sofa, but on the floor near her feet, resting his back against the cushions. It was a submissive, grounding posture that shocked her. He was lowering himself, physically, to make her feel dominant, to show her he wasn't a threat. He handed her the cup. "Drink," he commanded softly. Imani took a sip. It was perfect, spicy, sweet, hot. "Tell me," she said, her voice braver now. "If I had said yes to the marriage thing, what would that look like?" Minho swirled his tea, looking into the dark liquid. "It would look like protection," he said. "You would never worry about a bill, or a door, or a man disrespecting you ever again. You would have freedom to paint, to design, to do whatever it is that makes your soul light up." And in return, he looked up at her, his dark eyes vulnerable. "In return, I would have peace. I would have a home that isn't just a house. I would have you." He reached out and rested his hand on her ankle. The heat of his palm burned through her sheer stockings. "I am not asking for love, Imani. Not yet. I am asking for a partnership. I am asking for a chance to earn the love." The air in the room grew thick, charged with a magnetic pull that made it hard to breathe. Imani set the tea down on the table. She looked at this man, this powerful, terrifying, beautiful man, sitting at her feet, offering her the world on a silver platter. It was a fairy tale wrapped in danger. And God help her, she wanted it. She wanted to dive into the danger. She shifted, sliding off the sofa until she was sitting on the floor next to him. His eyes widened slightly, surprised by her movement. They were inches apart now. "You say you don't want love yet," Imani whispered, her gaze dropping to his mouth. "That sounds like a lie." Minho's breathing stopped. He reached up, his hand cupping the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I am a very good liar," he murmured, his voice rough. "But not to you. Never to you." He leaned in. Imani tilted her head. Their lips were a millimeter apart, the heat radiating between them, the promise of a kiss that would shatter her entire reality. The sound of his phone ringing was sharp, abrasive, and violent in the quiet room.
Minho froze.
He didn't pull away, but the softness in his eyes instantly hardened into ice. He closed his eyes for a second, a look of pure fury crossing his face, before he pulled back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone, not the sleek smartphone he had used earlier, but a small, rugged burner phone. He looked at the screen. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He stood up, towering over her again, the protector back in the armor. He answered the phone. "Speak." Imani watched him from the floor, cold rushing back into the spaces where his warmth had been. Minho listened for 3 seconds. His eyes snapped to Imani, wide with sudden, genuine alarm. When he barked into the phone. "Okay. Secure the perimeter." "I am moving her." He hung up and looked at Imani, the romance gone, replaced by tactical urgency. He reached down and pulled her to her feet, his grip bruising. "We have to leave," he said, his voice clipped. Now Imani's heart hammered.
What? Who was that?
"What's happening?" Minho looked at the glass walls, then at her, his expression grim. "That was not business," he said. "That was a warning.
Someone knows you are with me.
And they are coming." He pulled her toward the elevator. "I told you my world was dangerous, Imani. I am sorry. It seems the danger has arrived early."